That should be fucking illegal.
Look at that. Why were you so red? What kind of exposure do you have on that?
What the name we got to that?
On the camera.
I need to turn the exposure up for that.
Although it's not too bad now. Now we look kind of pale.
How's that now?
Is your screen just kind of dark? Is it?
Yeah.
Let me look on the. Did you flex so hard when you flexed in the thumbnail?
Fuck yeah, I do.
Right, we're 9 in, 10 in, and only 2 likes.
Lads.
Why do they hate us?
Why do you hate us so much?
Let us know if there are any audio or visual issues. As usual.
If you're wondering why both our cheeks are rosy, because we ate an incredibly spicy pot noodle that we bought in the market. And
It was dangerously spicy. I've never had.
The worst part was it was delicious.
Yeah.
But it was so spicy.
It was unedible.
Good morning.
Today is going to be a shorter live stream than usual. Because I need to go in 26 minutes. Just to let you know.
Is it a hard 5:30? Like?
No, it's a hard 5:30.
Hard 5:30?
Yeah. It's my man's birthday. I hope everyone's having a good lead into the weekend. Know a lot of people here. Oh yeah, nearly everyone here is morning time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
From LA. Have you been to LA?
Yeah.
So like, you don't have to answer that.
Yeah. How do you feel about dumbbell croc rows? Gerf, could you explain the purpose of ghetto row ring?
Oh, the thing I had with the pulley strap and the bar.
Oh yeah, they're great.
It just feels a little bit nicer. It just has a little bit more over your center of your mass and between your feet. You just kind of get it in a little bit closer, and the smaller diameter is a little bit easier to flex in your wrist as well. You kind of pull in as close as possible. Dumbbell croc rows. I think it's Dar's probably favorite exercise in the world. But
what's croc?
Matt Krokolensky.
Cheater, like.
Yeah, he used to use straps though, but you don't like the straps, I don't think, do you?
Cheater dumbbell row. Oh no, I like the straps. It's my favorite exercise ever.
Hot Sauce is wondering. So the RTA is an 8-week maintenance phase. Should you have the same length of maintenance for exercises like bench press? No.
The big issue with the squat is, right? Squat takes a huge amount of your recovery capital. If you're squatting hard like you are in the RTA, you take up an awful lot of your capacity to train other things. Your snatch isn't going to go well. Your clean and jerk won't go well, whatever. That's not the same with the bench press. The bench press is nowhere near as invasive on your kind of overall progress as the squat is. So then when we're trying to maintain a squat, we obviously just want to do the minimum amount that we maintain that 1RM number. Whereas with the bench press, you've much more latitude to train.
So with benching as well, so you need a higher frequency of benching to increase your bench. So they kind of not easy come, easy go, but the kind of frequency of that, the higher the frequency, like the faster those gains will go. Obviously, like Darren said, there's a lot more muscle mass, there's a lot more fatigue involved with squatting, there's a lot more central nervous system fatigue. Also, as well, with the maintenance phase, for most people, they're trying to get their squat somewhere and then do something else. So a lot of times people are doing the squat program and they're either going back to weightlifting, they've done their powerlifting comp, or they need to focus on their other powerlifting lifts. They're going back to their sports. So they have a variety of reasons, or they're just general strength and they've never pushed their squat that hard ever in their training career. And they need an actual, just a good, honest break for that few weeks, you know?
Okay. Kind of thick. Oh, no, sorry.
Thomas
Clark says, loving the RTA, just made all 3x8 on week 4, day 2. Nice. That's the hardest session in the program. So well done. Very happy with the progress. In future, what should I do if I miss a rep? Well, there's a kind of rule of thumb or a method we have with the RTA. So the first thing is that if you make 80% of your total volume load, right? So that's sets by reps by weight. So if you make, say, if you have 5x5 and you make 80% of those 5x5 reps, then you're good to go. You just continue on, tear ahead. If you make somewhere between 80% to 50% of total load, then you go back 1 week and you rerun the sessions as prescribed. If you make anywhere less than that, you probably have to regress more than 1 week and go again. There's a few exceptions to that rule, particularly that week 4, day 2 session is particularly hairy. If you have missed out on a certain amount of load, so say you were supposed to do 3 sets of 8 and you did a set of 8, a set of 6, and then on your last set, you were only able to do 2 or 3 reps, you can add on only 1 set at the end to try and bring up your total volume for the session. You might get an extra 2 or 3 reps in that last set, but that's generally how we kind of direct people on the RTA.
Kind of Thick is asking, it's pretty common for people to ask, can I do this program over X number of days instead of Y? Or can I use this exercise instead? At what point does a program become bastardized? So the program over X number of days is pretty acceptable as long as you understand it'll take you longer to get there and the magnitude of effect from the training might be lower, but it'll still have a decent training effect. The real one is, I suppose, when you start changing things like the exercises used and stuff. So, for example, if it's a squat program and you want to use an elastic band instead of a hip circle for the pause squat squats, that basically is irrelevant to that. It's a minor change. It's almost nonsensical change. Whereas if you were to change, if you were like, okay, I want to do the back squat program, I want to do the rotating wear, but I'm going to do it with bicep curls. And instead of 2 days, I'm going to do it as 4 days, and I'm going to replace all the exercises. There is eventually, like, at what point does a cucumber become a pickled, when you put it into a brine? There is a certain point where you've gone too far. So same with the program. If you were like, oh, you know what, my hamstrings are actually great, but I think I need more quad stuff, and you still do the main sets as told, but you added more hamstringer stuff, something like that, that's fine and that makes sense in some regards. But eventually, there's a point you're going too far and it's just not a program. Ideally, we only encourage people to change it or advise people to change it if you have to do something. If you're like, okay, I don't have lat pull downs or I don't have a belt squat or something like that, then it's fine. But there's that point of no return where you've just gone too far. You've become pickled instead of being a cucumber.
Yeah, I think a lot of time people like to put their own spin on things, and if it becomes that way where you're like, oh no, I really like doing deficit push-ups instead of doing bench press, anytime a change like that is made for me, it's just like a bastardized version of the program. It's something you've changed yourself for a non-apparent reason. The frequency of sessions, absolutely no bother. You're doing the exact same program over the same time. The other thing, which I think bastardizes programs, though, is the compression of the length of a program. So you change the progression slope. Like, the progression slope will be changed because you're doing it over a much shorter time. People will ask about doing the RTA, but doing it over 6 weeks or 5 weeks and doing 3 or 4 sessions per week, that's like a bastardization of the program, because the program won't work as well.
Hey guys, have you tried arm wrestling? If you have, what exercises would you recommend to get stronger? So obviously, all direct arm work would be vital. So forearm, bicep, tricep, then shoulder work, external rotation, internal rotation, lats, core, legs, obviously in that kind of order of magnitude or order of importance, but all of them would be certainly very, very useful. So like curls, push downs, dips, benching, any number of curls or whatever, forearm work, slot curls, obviously a shitload of grip work, transfer, internal and external rotation, pressing, any smaller specific stuff for the shoulder, delt work, anterior, posterior, Lou raises, rear delt holds,
loads of arm wrestling,
dumbbell rows, barbell rows, shitloads of core work, benching, squats, deadlifts, neck training.
Yeah,
everything.
I definitely think for the arm wrestlers, keeping it so it's a fairly unilateral focus, but on both sides, because I think you see a lot of arm wrestlers and they're like this.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you're an arm wrestler. I never would have known.
Yeah.
Whereas you can get much better development. You'll have much better injury prevention. You can also do things like training both sides fairly frequently, and you'll actually really raise your total ceiling of progression there. People feel like it will hold them back because they're putting half the work into their good side. But it would be much more beneficial to you if you were a kind of much more well-rounded athlete, doing the squats, the power cleans, the deadlifts like Gerf is talking about, getting a much better overall athletic development, and bringing that into your arm wrestling. That'll be very, very beneficial. The only arm wrestling I've done is when you're in a pub with someone and people are like, go on, arm wrestle them. That's the only time I've ever arm wrestled. I've never done it in the kind of competitive YouTube environment.
Yeah, I don't think I don't. I get the appeal, but I would never. I have zero interest in it myself.
Having seen a lot of those YouTube arm wrestlers, though, many of so a lot of them are very, very athletic. They're huge, juicy, massive fellas, but a lot of guys aren't in great shape, and they're just kind of strong arm wrestlers. And I would advise staying away from that as much as you can. Okay, Dr. Demographics IE it's 2 questions. So, what's target heart rate for increasing aerobic capacity? And then how do you know when you've crossed into aerobic training? So you think about this in 2 ways. Aerobic training, if you're looking to get fitter, most of the time your target heart rate is like 65 to 75% of heart rate max. You can get your heart rate max by getting 220 beats per minute and then minus your age from that, right? Around those kind of numbers for a prolonged period will make you much more aerobically fit. But how do you know when you've crossed into aerobic training? If you look at most muscle physiology or exercise physiology books, they'll talk about the use of energy systems and that you have your initial one, which will just be that ATP spike. That's just a fraction of a second. Then you've phosphocreatine, which is first 10 seconds of a movement. Then you've glycolytic, which might be the first 10 to 15 minutes of a movement. And then you have your lipid system, which is afterwards. And that's where most of the kind of aerobic work will happen, right? So you're talking about 20 minutes or longer before that kind of energy system comes in. In reality, all those energy systems engage at the exact same time, and just some of them drop off, and some of them are used more. Some are given higher priority at the start. They all kind of kick in at the same time. So I would say for your aerobic training, most of the time, don't get the heart rate way, way up there. Like around 75, 80% is pretty good. You're pretty clipping along at that point. And then what you're looking for is prolonged use. So you want that cardiovascular system to be working very, very hard for 25, 45, 60 minutes minimum to be trying to bring around those kind of biochemical changes. The aerobic fitness side of things is very much a change in blood value and cell chemistry. It's not a thing of getting the muscle to be bigger or getting the muscle to have better endurance. It's literally changing what your blood is comprised of and changing a few of the structures in the cell to be better at processing oxygen. So that's why you do need those prolonged time periods to get that real aerobic effect. There's some stuff that HIIT training will give you that very high-end aerobic work. It certainly will. The disadvantage of HIIT training, though, is that HIIT training is going to tax the same things that you're probably already taxing through your strength and conditioning work. So it'll be taxing your legs, your spinal load, your neural load in general, because you're moving a bit harder, you're pushing things faster, even though it's a shorter time period. You're just going to fatigue yourself in those kind of more explosive movements or those higher intensity movements a bit more. There's a reason people still do the running and still do the bike work and still do the rowing and still do the swimming to get aerobically fit.
Is that both questions?
Yeah, but there's a question in between.
Hi lads, this is not an injury question. Oh,
this is not an injury question. But here's the injury question.
I'm not racist, but okay, folks, I'm recovering full body lifting and hitting legs and machines. Yeah, if I suppose, yeah, hamstrings, lower body, whatever stuff you can do. Listen to your physio.
I belt squat heavily.
Yeah, if you can belt squat, if you can access, I would definitely be investing in a belt squat. I suppose you can't do any back squats, front squats, deadlifts. No. Probably obviously all upper body work is really minimized. Belt squat would be the big one. That would be the main one you'd be doing. Alex with the very pretty squat is saying, has anyone done a study on squat jerk success compared to split jerk success? There's no need because the split jerk is more successful.
They actually have done the study.
The Soviets have done a lot of work on the metrics, the biometrics and the biomechanics of squat jerk versus split jerk. And even looking at the numbers on a page would tell you that the split jerk would be more successful compared to the squat jerk.
Nicola Todorovic says, trap bar jumps good option for power development, ? Really, 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 really depends what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Power is like having a higher power number. Did that pay-per-view go out, the banded paper?
This evening.
Out this evening. One this evening where you talk about power as a metric and why power might not necessarily be the thing you're looking for. But we'll take two examples here, Nicola, right? So say you're a basketball player who wants a higher vertical jump. You obviously want high levels of power development. Higher vert. In that case, trap bar jumps, if there was an empty trap bar and it was very, very lightly, like very light, less than 20 kilos, might be a good option. Maybe if the trap bar was 10 or 15 kilos, it would probably be a better option, because you want to be moving fast enough where you're really, really getting those fast twitch fibers activated and not just building strength or building kind of general capacity. Trap bar jumps with any kind of load probably aren't the way forward for vertical jump height. Now, if you were a rugby player, or you were an American football player or an ice hockey player, someone who's looking to become a big, powerful person, are trap bar jumps the best way to do it? Probably not. In those cases, you're trying to develop the most power possible, and those kind of power metrics on a barbell for a deadlift or a squat or a bench press, usually you're producing the most power between 60 and 80% of 1RM. There's absolutely no way you'll be able to leave the ground on a trap bar deadlift with 60 to 80% of 1RM. So to answer your question, trap bar jumps, good for option for power development? Probably not. There's probably a much sharper scalpel you can use to skin that cat.
So in the comparison of weighted jumps, trap bar is actually the best one that'll give you the most power output compared to other weighted implements. So if you have a barbell on your back, or compared to maybe a weighted vest, the trap bar seems to produce more power. So there's a good paper. I'll never be able to find it now, but in comparison of barbell on the back and I think trap bar, and they compared something else, but the trap bar produced very good power. It was about 10% of body weight for both of them, which is in general kind of the weight you'll see for weighted jumps. There's a lot of arguments to maybe is that better or worse. For example, when you use weighted jumps, you get what's known as greater ground reactive forces. So you're putting more force into the ground, which makes perfect sense because you are lifting extra weight. Extra weight requires more force to lift it, as would deadlifts, for example, or whatever. But you produce more power. Usually they compared to unweighted jumping and weighted jumping, you produce more power at body weight. So it's the lower body. What's the name of that theory? The dynamic lower body theory. So basically, the lower limbs are designed to produce more power without external weight compared to with other weight. So there's a lot of nuance to that. And the language isn't that precise from everyone. It's kind of there needs to be more words. You know, like the way they say the Greeks have like multiple words for love or whatever, Latin. There needs to be more words for power.
There needs to be a lot more words.
There needs to be more words for this because the
nomenclature is horrendous.
It's hard to talk about it, you know. If you had metrics for everything, it'd be great, but no one has metrics. No one has a ground reactive plate in their fucking bedroom.
Yeah, maybe you don't, you loser.
So the big problem with that is kind of the use of the words and what you want them for, and not you in general. I mean, just the entire biomechanical thing of it.
At kind of thick, just to get back to your point from earlier, you were asking about doing it for different days. Loads of people run kind of thick is just saying he was wanting to run the combat sports athlete program. Loads of people run that 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and they just extend out the length of time they run the program for. That's absolutely perfect. In terms of changing out, you say you have zero ollie experience, so you might be able to do the power cleans from week 6 onwards. You'll be able to do everything else. But if the power cleans are an issue, then you can just do a really fast clean pull or something else along those lines instead of the power cleans. Okay, Stephen Ward has a great question. He said, give us your most meathead S&C takes that you'll stand by regardless of what science dictates.
I think probably the stronger you are, the bigger you'll be at bodybuilding. So if you come into bodybuilding, you want to be as big as possible. I think you're better off being to a decent level of strength.
Okay.
So you'd be better served doing more focused strength training than physique training. So instead of going straight from strength training to isolation stuff, straight to isolation, I think you'd be better off getting like a reasonable squat, deadlift, and bench, and something like that strength levels with bigger movements, then go to isolation work. Yeah.
I suppose in terms of meathead stuff for me,
there's no real science around that, but most people would kind of disagree. Not most people would disagree, but it's kind of...
Yeah. I definitely think this isn't a meathead take,
That's
but
not even S&C either.
yeah, I think almost every strength athlete is out of shape and not fit enough.
Yeah.
And I know people are like, oh, that's not what that matters. And it might matter specifically to you putting 10 kilos onto your squat right now, but it'll definitely mean you'll be squatting in 10 years' time because you won't have given up because you're in shit shape, because you're powerlifting and you're not looking after anything else. I think it will allow you to be injury free for much, much longer, because people who are really struggling in the session, really breathing hard as they go through longer sets, really not recovering well in between each set or in between each session, they're the people then who leave their positions, go to shit, or they'll skip a few sets of the warm-up because they feel really tired after doing 4 sets in a warm-up instead of 2 sets in a warm-up, you know. Yeah, I think everyone could be a better athlete in general in strength sports. But that's like the opposite of a meathead thing then.
Yeah, I don't really have any takes like that I can think of right now. Eric is wondering how my finger's doing. I think it's doing pretty good. I've taken off the cast since Wednesday now. What did they say? Friday or Wednesday night. So I've got some extension back. So I've got some control over it, which is great. So we'll just see how long I need to leave it in the bench for.
Hector CM says, any recommendations for a more snappy snatch? I get the feeling some tension is getting lost along the pulls.
So technique and timing, obviously, which two are very intrinsic to each other, is the most important thing for speed. You need good technique. So good technique implies correct positions in the correct sequence at the correct speeds. So snappiness only comes from quality technique. So it's not something to be rushed. Obviously, inadequate levels of strength are important, but excess levels aren't that important for the snappy feeling or the fast snatch. But you need to be a certain level of speed in your fast twitch engines, but ultimately fast twitch muscles. After that, then though, technique and timing are the most important things for that snappy feeling snatch. So chances are you've huge glaring technical issues if you were to ask us, you know, if we had to guess.
And I will say on the snappiness of the snatch,
yeah,
I think snappiness usually comes from that gap between the finish of your second pull and you come, like snappiness comes in the third pull all the time. And most of the time it's because you're making too much contact with your hips and you're swinging the bar out and around. And then it's no longer snappy because you don't have any of this movement happening. Jason Reed says, will you guys ever put out an off-season athlete running program? Absolutely. If that is something people want, Jason, it is absolutely very, very, very easily facilitated for us to do that.
Mr. Burkhardt says, in yesterday's video, you mentioned being wrong, overestimating an athlete's potential when they trained for the first time. It's not. I wasn't even talking about just when they trained me. It's just people I saw doing stuff, you know.
People want you to name and shame them, Gareth. People want to know who it was.
What prevented them from becoming great athletes, weightlifters? On the flip side, what made athletes turn into great athletes when they didn't look like us? So one thing I've never been wrong with, if I said someone is shit, they've always been shit. You know, just want to put that out there. I've always been right about that. But sometimes I've seen people definitely with the physiology. What made them not turn into it? I don't know, that kind of X factor. A lot of times it's just consistency. A lot of times it's people just didn't stick with something. They might have been decent with it, and they lacked that capacity just to continue with a sport. You know, 10 years of a certain sport is not easy, and just a lot of them that I saw didn't turn out like that. Just didn't stick with it. They, for whatever reason, they just fell by. They didn't make the sacrifices, or they didn't make the effort to do things. That's some of the main reasons. Why didn't the people who stuck with it, who I saw, I thought they'd be good, didn't turn out to be good? Sometimes, weirdly enough, you'll have the proportions, you'll have the apparent muscle composition, you'll have the desire, and sometimes the development just doesn't go that way. It just doesn't work out for whatever reason. They just don't respond to training in a good fashion. It's one of those intangibles, I suppose, and that's why those athletic selection things are always trying to get more scientific and more specific, you know, because if you could just eye someone accurately, you'd be able to do it. It's almost to the extent where I just don't guess with anyone anymore. I just never guess with people. I just look at them and I'm like, oh, let's see what happens in 5 years, you know, because sports are hard to be good at them.
Yeah. Of people I've flagged as being possibly very talented or possibly having a huge level of potential, aside from injury, I think by far the biggest thing is the psychological thing. They either don't want to train anymore. They don't have that want to compete anymore. They might have been full of piss and vinegar and in kind of adolescence or formative years of their life and had a lot of anger and drive and push to go on. And when they kind of get through maybe those college years or school years and come out and have a job and stuff, that kind of real drive leaves them. I've definitely seen more people lose a sporting career psychologically than they've lost it through anything else. Things get a bit more comfortable. They mightn't really feel like they need to prove themselves all the time, every single day anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that definitely does, that definitely wipes a lot of athletes out of having very, very successful careers.
How should I think about weight gain if I'm well under the optimal weight class for my height? Currently low 67 at 5'10".
I think the first thing you should do is look at what your composition is right now. If you're in immaculate shape right now, then you could start to bump on maybe a kilo every month and a half or something. Just slowly creep up there. Make sure you're very, very, very diligent. Make sure you're staying in good shape. Just really aggressively trying to put on that kilo or 0.7 of a kilo every month and then moving up towards that. If you're not in good shape now and you're underweight, I would start off by recompositioning and trying to lose some of that fat mass before you ever think about gaining weight and going up.
Is ZMA still worth taking even if you notice no effect from it? Depends on your dietary composition. What's in your diet? Are you getting the requisite number of minerals that you're getting from ZMA? If you don't, and you feel you are, then there's no point taking it. No, for sure not.
No.
Which is weird because I've never heard anyone say that.
Did you see Tyson Fury's weight training video? No.
Do you know what I think about Tyson Fury? So people are always like, this is not related to the answer to this question, but it's related to Tyson Fury. People are always like, oh, Tyson Fury, it's not weights, it's technique. People forget that Tyson Fury tested positive for DECA, and we know performance-enhancing drugs impart a positive effect, even if it's not the apparent growth of muscle mass. People are like, oh, it's the sweet science, the sweet sport, the sweet science, whatever they call it. It's not a weight that Anthony Joshua's muscle bound, but he tested positive for DECA. Said he ate wild boar's testicles. The farmer came out 2 years ago and said that they were going to pay him to say that they sold him the wild boar, but they never even got the money from Tyson Fury, so they didn't even pay up for their bullshit.
I wouldn't care if he got a doping sanction.
No, but
and he paid your man.
Yeah. But no, so it's funny. I need to bring it up next time we talk about Tyson Fury. But anyway, no, I didn't actually see the video. I'd be interested to see if you have a link to it because I tried to have a Google there, but I couldn't find it.
Could not find it. Hot Sauce says, I have strength goals, squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press. How would I incorporate overhead press into my powerlifting program? Well, the first thing you need to kind of plan out is when each of those things is going to get better. If you're trying to raise all of those boats on the same tide, you're going to have a hard time with the bench press and the strict press. It's just two pressing movements, both of whom react very well to frequency. The bench press reacting incredibly well to frequency. And you're trying to bring all those up at the same time, it will be difficult. If it was me, in this case, I would start off with firstly doing the strict press. So I'd be bringing up my squat, bringing up my deadlift, and bringing up my strict press, just kind of maintaining my bench, possibly benching once or twice a week with no real massive intensity. And then I'd be overhead pressing. Then on top of that. So probably overhead pressing a minimum of twice a week. You could bump it up then near the end of your program. Once you had done that and once you'd achieved what you wanted with the overhead press, you can taper off that and just maintain that overhead press and then hit the bench press quite hard. There are two reasons I say that are, firstly, the bench press will affect the overhead press in a way that the overhead press won't necessarily affect the bench. So if you were benching a lot and really getting in good shape to bench a lot, you'll really become internally rotated. You'll lose that range of motion overhead and it'll become much more difficult. And the second reason is that your frequency on the bench press will be quite high. So you're talking about 3 to 4 times per week frequency on the bench when you're getting towards competition. And having built a lot of capacity with the strict press will make that jump or that stepwise loading in frequency will make that an awful lot easier because you're already in good pressing shape. you want to cherry pick a few there?
Are you bring your laptop with you?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, we're going to cherry pick a few questions because I must run. Someone says, Lucas Arkira says, snatched a PR by 75 kilos after watching 46 minutes of David Schmoggins.
Oscar saying, what are the pros and cons of doing a weightlifting competition early on? So the sooner you get competing, the sooner you'll learn how to compete. So if you don't compete for a very long time and you get your numbers up, you still won't be very good competing. So the sooner you get it over with, the better. I think I did my first part of weightlifting competition after 5 or 6 weeks of weightlifting, and it's just the best thing you could do. So very, very important to compete early and often. Those are a good one for February. Also, if you do it, if you come. I don't know for select communicado.
What's that?
He said if he does one in February, will we come to it?
Where's it on?
Ireland, I assume. I don't know where the one in February is though.
Oh, we'd come, yeah.
Yeah, we think about it.
We mightn't be allowed in, like.
We might be this year now because
oh yeah.
Presidente is gone.
Ganked Pom says, is there any reason not to use a belt and knee sleeves for squat and deadlift? Will it actually benefit you significantly? Yes. If you're an athlete, so rugby player, soccer player, sprinter, thrower, whatever it is, you need to think about the squat and deadlift in 2 different ways. So first way is that it's an incredibly effective training tool for you and your sport. Then the second thing is it's a very effective training tool for the squat and the deadlift to make those numbers higher. When we start bringing in a belt and knee sleeves, we start dampening the effectiveness of that training tool. So if we say knee sleeves, we're going to take some of that emphasis off the quads, or might possibly make the squat easier. With the belt, although the research kind of is divided on this, you're probably limiting the amount of core activation that goes on, or you're certainly making it easier to activate your core. And then that exercise now becomes easier to do, and it might not be as effective a training tool for me in my particular sport. Now, the second case, where he said it's a really good way of getting the squat and the deadlift to be higher, in certain cases, in certain sport strength and conditioning applications, it's just really important to have a crazy high squat or a crazy high deadlift. And in those cases, absolutely, go ahead and use it. But it's not always best just to throw them on, because they're going to limit the effectiveness of those 2 tools.
And Kind of Tick said he's buying the Combat Sports program, and Joe said the Combat Sports program is great.
Nice.
Thanks, guys. Jimmy Jam is saying, how come long and triple jump are squat heavy? Isn't this the opposite of the velocity curve? What am I missing? So there's a certain level of force production that a person, an athlete, needs an ability to produce before they can exploit their best velocity, their best movement. So having zero ability to produce force obviously will not allow you to produce any velocity. So they are intrinsically related. Now, the maximum ability to produce force will detrimentally affect your ability to produce your maximum velocity, because you're strayed too far into one discipline and adapt towards that. But a certain proficiency in the force production spectrum of the graph does allow you to express your velocity better. There's definitely detrimental training to it. It's not a lot, but it's pretty significant amount of force that you can produce will positively affect your sprinting and stuff. It's the maximal effort stuff. So the maximum capacity of your force is usually the issue. So it's not so much how heavy you can squat in relation to numbers or body weight. In general, it's how slow you're squatting those weights is probably the detrimental thing to our athletics in that division. So them not going beyond something like 75 to 80%. And you can technically still increase your max by those working sets and just work up over time without ever actually touching a 1RM and just going by bar velocity. So that in general is part of it. Also, as in high force training in general is, is the best for building muscle mass. Of course, you still need muscle mass to reduce the velocity in long jump and triple jump.
Okay, last question, and then let's go. Gavin Murphy asks, love Ollie lifting and CrossFit, train 4 or 5 times a week. PB still happen, but are rare. What age can an average person expect a significant decline in numbers times, even with good programming? To be honest, that number has changed drastically in the last decade. I guarantee you there's guys at the Masters CrossFit Games now. They're not natural, but there's guys at the Masters CrossFit Games now in their 60s who are hitting all-time PBs. It really depends, firstly, on what level you're at. Like, are you going to hit an all-time PB if you were an Olympic weightlifter and you keep training into your 40s? Probably not. If you're somebody who's a recreational CrossFit athlete, are you going to hit PBs into your 40s? Yes, it's very, very likely you can keep going. The progression will be slower. It'll take longer to get there. It will take more concerted effort to get there. It will be harder to avoid injuries. But yes, you can certainly keep going for much, much, much longer than anybody in the YouTube comment section will think you can.
Yep.
Okay. We'll talk to you all again soon. Thanks, guys.